The senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
What's up, party people, and welcome to HBR News number 175. 175! Britain might make misogyny illegal and California women mandatory on company boards. I'm your host, Brian Martinez, and I am here with my woman-murdering alt-right gateway drug dealers to look at the best feels, funnies, and what the fucks to discuss Slam Badger style. I forget. It's the slam of the clam. And that is the style in which this will be examined and discussed. So we'll just get right into it, shall we?
I'd like to remind everyone where clam slam comes from, in case people think it's just a series of syllables. It's the female equivalent of teabagging.
Yes.
I'd like you to all remember that imagery every time Brian says that, because it's important.
It's very important.
It's the most important thing ever.
It's the best thing ever, actually. I wish that teabagging was done in a way that is as I don't know, there's something like just delicious about the just clam slam. It just sounds right.
Well, that's the thing, you can slam a clam. You can't really slam balls. They're a delicate little collection of objects there.
Yeah. That's true.
Like tea bags, you've got to slowly lower them into the infusion.
I will say this, when you only have one, it's actually, you're less likely to get hurt there. It's actually been a benefit. less clackers.
I don't have a avoiding.
Yeah, I have.
They can't get mashed together, I think. Is what very often happens.
I don't have to worry about clackers action. That doesn't happen. So it's actually quite liberating.
This is the kind of hard-hitting discussion that you came here for.
That's what clam slam badger style means. So today's panel consists of Mike, if I pay for Crunchyroll, am I also paying a Misandrous Bills? Jay. Hannah, I wish I had thought of promising something, raising $85K to fund it, then fly all the way to Japan so I can complain about being harassed about it, Wallen. Doctor, does this bikini make Sadiq Khan's butt look big, Randabercam, and me, the Doge in charge, who wonders if Colin will be kneeling for the sweatshop workers who made the shoes for the corporation he signed a contract with. So, we have a great show lined up for you guys today that has nothing to do with any of the stuff that I kind of hinted at a minute ago. So, please be sure to continue the conversations both in the chat as well as in the comment section. On this week's HBR News Show, we'll be talking about the events of the week, including the March for Men in Melbourne, a celebrity woman who apologizes for lying about false accusations of domestic violence, again, Thomas the Tank Engine getting woke and being rebooted to be more inclusive, the controversy surrounding Riot Games, and more. So stay with us, because it's going to be a good show, and we look forward to seeing the discussion. And stick around afterwards for the patron-only after show. Zachary Small of hyperallergic.com, yeah, that's actually a website, and I don't think it has anything to do with allergies, but it might make you sick. Hyperallergic.com has penned an interview with Emma Mattress Girl Solkowitz because we cannot make her go away, asking her about the Me Too movement. Why are we talking to her about the Me Too movement? Because she was doing it before it was cool. And she also has a problem with the idea that her queerness has been erased in most articles written about her experience. No, I'm serious. Anyway, if you would like to participate in our after shows, either as an audience member or a participant, please consider becoming a patron at www.patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. And if you don't want to wake up one morning to find yourself unable to find our content because YouTube finally dropped the axe on our channels, go to badgerfeed.com. That's badgerfeed.com. So, without further ado, I'm going to get into the first story, which is for Mike J. We're going to talk about the Men's March in Melbourne. Mike?
Thank you, Brian. On August 25th, supporters of the men's rights movement took to the streets of Melbourne, Australia. The March for Men, set up by Australian writer and political commentator Sydney Watson was designed to, quote, to show Australian men that their issues matter too, and, quote, encourage women and men to band together in solidarity. Several hundred advocates for men's rights and their supporters marched on Federation Square, where Watson and others spoke about issues affecting men and boys. However, they weren't the only ones there. Across the police line, an anti-fascist group of protesters calling themselves the Campaign Against Racism and Fascism numbered roughly 1 to 200.
How can you disagree with them? Clearly, they're against racism and fascism. I guess the men's group should just go home, because if they're standing there in opposition, then those guys must be racists and fascists. I mean, that's the math, right?
If you call yourself against racism and fascism, that means exactly what you say. Whereas these men's rights advocates are absolutely not what they say they are. They hate women and they want to kill them.
And remember, if you want to know what men's rights advocates think, you should not listen to what they have to say.
Yeah, that's right. You shouldn't listen to us if you want to know what you have to say.
Yes.
Go ahead, Mike J. I'm sorry for interrupting. I just had to chime in.
No problems. But yeah, numbered roughly 1 to 100. So some estimates have them, basically, the MRA is outnumbering the Antifa people by 2 to 1. Some estimates even say 3 to 1.
Whoa! Wait a minute! They didn't say they were Antifa. They were just campaigning against racism and fascism. Come on now. We don't want to misrepresent what they stand. Antifa is anti-fascist. These guys are against fascism and racism too. So they're even more righteous.
They're mixed up with the Judean People's Front. Come on.
Yeah, Antifa are just anti-fascist. No more, no less. That's all it means. Are you Antifa? No, I'm not Antifa. I'm just anti-fascist. There's a difference.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, Mike. I'm sorry. We'll get through this.
Despite the typical Antifa-style chanting and rabble-rousing, things for the Men's Rights March went off mostly without issue. Media coverage of the event has been mostly what you'd expect, with Jeff Sparrow of The Guardian calling the event, quote, a business model aimed to transform rage into page views.
Projection.
But not all of it has been negative, such as Madison Griffith's piece for The Feed, which shares several mostly positive interviews with Men's March attendees.
I'm so glad they kept the when they did the ICMI, the International Conference for Men's Issues in Australia, in
2017.
It was last year, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They kept the venue secret until very shortly before the conference was to go forth. And the first thing I wondered was, wow, this is getting a fair amount of media coverage. Why didn't the ICMI get that much media coverage? There were several hundred people there, talking about their things. But like I say, I'm kind of glad it didn't, because, well, we didn't give the media enough time to scramble around us and make a story about it. And that was a very shrewd decision.
Yeah.
Whereas these guys announced where they were going to be, in order to attract people there. So it did get, because we've never had protesters at the ICMI. I wasn't at the first one, but I don't think they had any in the removed.
No,
no, there were no protesters. What they did was they got us not kicked out, but canceled. They got our initial venue canceled. And it was quite an interesting series of events. We found out there were threats against the venue, and the venue demanded extra money because of the threats. They needed extra money for extra security, so we started fundraising for the extra money, for the extra security, and then the venue threatened they canceled us for publicizing the problem and trying to solve it, and threatened to sue us for libel or slander or something for talking about it, and claimed that the conversation had never happened. Meanwhile, we got a new venue. Our venue was at a VFW post, and so we were able to go ahead with the conference despite the efforts to prevent it. And part of the reason there was no protest was because of what venue we were at. Part of it was because it was surrounded by construction and there was no place to protest.
Yeah, the mistake Mike Buchanan made this year was when he scored Birmingham Birmingham Stadium, that venue, he publicized it. He sort of even did a video saying, "Here's the venue. This is where we're going to be doing all the things and stuff." And that was when enough people wrote angry letters to the people of the venue, and they said no, broke their contract. I mean, maybe some other day we'll talk about that particular broken contract and whether that goes to thing. But don't mention the venue until shortly before it starts. Sargon made this mistake twice this year as well, in Bristol and in Scarborough. Like if you announce the venue more than a month before it starts, that gives enough of I don't know what to call them. I don't know what noun or collective thing to call them, but that gives those people time to focus their efforts on where you are, because they're everywhere. There's a chapter of them everywhere. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, at some point, the fact that they claim we're powerful and we're the patriarchy and our voices are always heard and never silenced and so on, that needs to be put up beside the fact that every time we try to do anything, if they find out where our venue is, they threaten us and they threaten our venue and they get us canceled. Because that's a bit of a conflict there, with them saying, oh, you guys are the majority, you guys are the powerful, you guys are the establishment, and yet if we don't keep our venues secret when we meet, they get taken away from us. If they find out we're at a convention, they get us kicked out. If they find out we have a platform on social media, they get us kicked off, or they get us silenced, or they get us demonetized. That really doesn't speak much to being the majority and being the people in power and so on, does it?
Mike, you said that Mike J, that is. You said that not all of the coverage was negative. Are there? What are some of the positive things that were said? Do you remember?
Well, it wasn't things that were
Or
said
maybe
more
they
or less.
maybe they were just neutral, like they're not all Nazis. Like, was it something like that?
Was it actual like journalism? Or they just tell you what happened?
It was
they still do that.
from the feed, the Madison Griffiths one. And just one thing I have to note that's totally off topic, but I had to do a double take, as it said, by Madison Griffiths, a photography by Sam Biddle.
Sam
And
Biddle?
No, it is not that Sam Biddle.
Oh,
It's totally
okay. Bring back bullying, Sam Biddle?
No. Different guy. This is Australian living alter ego who does photography.
I am sorry that guy shares a name with that asshole.
But they basically just went out and interviewed people, and they just said, it said, amid the fray, the feed was there to ask attendees, why are you here? And what do you hope March for Men will achieve? Below are a selection of their responses. And like I said, for the most part, they're good, although they did find one guy who, this guy with the dyed blue goatee and the Make Australia Great Again hat, who basically just came flat out and said, I hate women. Well, a lot of them.
Oh.
Of course, they had to find that one guy, but the previous 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that they got were actually pretty decent.
Yeah, but that one guy probably, they'll latch onto that as indicative of all of them. And for all we know, he was LARPing as a guy, who, just went all out. I'm going to wear a MAGA hat, and I'm going to... What's the art? Was he just wearing a Pepe mask too? Did he go all out to troll everybody?
He's also wearing a leather jacket, although I understand it was an actually kind of cold day, so that sort of makes sense.
Well, it's winter down there, technically.
And I guess just wearing the March for Men shirt. I don't know if those were passed out or whatever, but...
Well,
it was they actively went after guys who were wearing the March for Men t-shirt, but hey, that's...
Yeah,
I'm sure sign that you're going after the people that were there for the thing.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, if I was going to a women's march, I'd be trying to talk to the women with the pussy hats, right? So, or the women that have the craziest signs or whatever. This one bites back or grabs back or whatever. Which they do. They all
cosplay
can.
doesn't mean consent, and they have to remind us that cosplay doesn't mean consent. But wearing a MAGA hat absolutely means punch me in the face, please.
Yeah.
This is what I was wearing when I was interviewed. Tell me I was asking for it.
Exactly. I got one super chat from Hoki Bukisa, $1.99. Thank you, Hoki. And he says, Jalalabad, Clam Slam, Candyman, Sam I am banana. Or maybe I am a banana. Do you guys remember that?
I agree.
No. My spoon is too big. All right. Do you remember that? Well, I want to just give props, shout out to Sydney Watson for organizing it. It sounds like, despite the hate, which you knew you were going to get anyways, you managed to pull off a march, and I hope that there are more of them in the future. And to do it in Melbourne, which, as I understand it, in Australia, Melbourne is like the San Francisco of Australia. It's like the most SJWE city. I could be wrong, but from what I heard from people who live there, that's what they tell me. So, okay.
And I hope you had a good time.
Yeah.
I've been on a men's march before, and there was a lot of sort of walking fairly quickly around the city, sort of chanting and shit, which is some people's bag, but there's enjoyable things too. Like sometimes you stop, sometimes you all go in for a beer and then come out again and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm sure they did in Australia. There was one big pub crawl, I bet.
Of the two people that we had in our Discord that went, I think both of them had a pretty decent time. One of the guys was pretty much there in the thick of it.
Yeah, Mike, you dropped out.
Oh.
After thick of it.
One of our guys was there in the thick of it on Discord, not really live streaming, but just on Discord so we could listen to what he was saying. And we were hearing a good deal of it, and the Antifa disruption was laughably quiet.
Oh, yeah?
And, yeah.
Little dissenting voices in the distance, you know?
Oh,
like,
the same tired chants.
Yeah.
Racist, fascist MRAs, something, go away.
But they're totally not the same group because they have a different name. Totally.
No,
chants,
they're not the same. They said it right there. They're the coalition against racism and fascism or something. Campaign
the People's
against,
Front of Judea.
Just like North Korea is the People's Democratic Republic of, because it's right in the name. It's nobody. You know what? Kim Jong-un gets reelected every year. That's because they love him. Because obviously it's a democratic republic. So stop judging them. You don't know their experience. All right, moving on to the next story. Bigots. Mike J, would you tell us a little bit about Big Brother? Not the 1984. That's a whole other thing that we're going to get into in the next 5 years. But rather
this is much worse.
Yeah, this is a story that I did not think was going to be this in depth, but when I actually started getting a little bit into it,
I didn't know there was still a UK celebrity Big Brother. I'm already saddened by this news that this fucking show still exists.
Yeah, we failed. Anyway, so the Big Brother beatdown. During the latest run of the UK version of Celebrity Big Brother, soap actress Roxanne Palate.
Never heard of her.
That's what I've been calling her, and that's what I will continue calling her since I've not got a satisfactory pronunciation.
Just go with Palette. Palette sounds good.
Palette. Okay, Palette.
But,
Palette.
But never heard of it. It's Celebrity Big Brother. I've never heard of these people. No one has ever heard of these people. Well, I haven't. I'm out of the loop. Don't know who this Ryan Thomas is either.
Anyway, soap actress Roxanne Palette alleged that fellow housemate and actor Ryan Thomas, quote, punched me like a boxer would punch a bag. Quite the accusation. Palette soon turned to several fellow house guests against Thomas while he declared his innocence, insisting the punch was merely a playful tap. Palette was quick to call Thomas a liar, a woman beater, and to state that he was manipulating the others into believing she was making the whole story up. Despite Thomas being given a formal warning and told that repeat behavior would lead him to be evicted, this wasn't good enough for Palette. She claimed she did not feel safe with Thomas still in the house and advocated for his removal. However, due to the nature of reality TV show, it was plain for all who were watching to see what really happened. Thomas's version of events was correct, and Palette was indeed over-dramatizing the story. The viewing public quickly turned against her, with the UK's Office of Communications receiving over 25,000 complaints about the situation. Palette's fellow soap stars were also quick to criticize her behavior. Soon after, Palette chose to voluntarily leave the house and exit the show. In an interview with Channel 5's Jeremy Vine, Palette apologized about the situation, stating, quote, I massively apologize to not just Ryan, but to his family and friends and his fans and every single person who watched that and completely and justifiably saw an overreaction to what wasn't a malicious act. Not everyone is quick to forgive Pallet's behavior, though. In an interview with Big Brother UK's presenter, Emma Willis, she was grilled about the situation. During the course of the interview, Willis asked Pallet, quote, "Can you imagine if those cameras hadn't been there? You would have ruined somebody," and mentioned that, quote, "lots of people are not buying your apology."
Wow. So some people sounds like some people are getting slowly red pilled. Although to be fair, if the cameras weren't there, she probably wouldn't have made the fuss. She was probably trying to make the fuss in order to kick up headlines and shit because they know what they're doing.
Yeah, that
Oh,
kind
yeah,
of surprised
that's-
me too.
That you know what? I've used to watch some of these reality shows, and that's what they do in all of them. They always want to find someone that they can turn into a villain. And I wouldn't be surprised if the producers saw something like this and said, "You know what? This is our hook. Let's egg her on. Let's tell her to keep this going." But that's just my little conspiracy theory.
Yeah, no, totally. That is exactly what they do. Whenever you watch the first episode of Big Brother, where they do little introductions to the characters, they have little 2 minute sort of montages of interviews with them, and it's always, you can tell it's edited down to what makes them look like the biggest prick they possibly can look like. There's a way of editing someone to seem like a nice person, and a way of editing someone to seem like a shallow, hateable fuck. And they always edit those things to make them look like shallow, hateable fucks.
Yeah, there was one of those reality shows had someone, and I can't even remember now who it was. It's someone I was a fan of when I was a kid, and I'm like, oh well, I might watch this one because this person's on it. And I watched one episode. I'm like, I can't do this, and that was why. It was they weren't enjoying each other's company in the house. They weren't banding together to make a household work. They weren't even just following the lives of the people in the house. They were pitting them against each other, and every reality show seems like it is the last person on the island. And of course, they're going to vote people out of the house, and they're going to do this, and they're going to do that. It's all about villainizing somebody and making somebody popular. And in the end, it's doing that for money. But this idea, though, that this would roll, that this would work, they could get a woman to villainize a guy over play fighting. I mean, it would have if the angle of the camera hadn't clearly shown, that this was playful, and that her clothing didn't move, and her body wasn't injured, and she wasn't even upset in the moment, that it really wasn't that big of a deal. It would have. And it's the first thing that struck me when I saw this was, yeah, guys, women are totally equal to men, completely 100% no different until you play fight with them, and then they're wimps. And it was it just blew my mind. But I was really glad to see the backlash against the false accusation. And I was really glad to see people admit that it was a false accusation and not just a mistake on her part, and not just a misunderstanding, that she overreacted, and that she essentially lied about this guy. And I was really glad to see that it resulted in an apology. Even though, yeah, I know a lot of people aren't buying the apology, but honestly, 10 years ago, it would have resulted in digging her heels in and saying, you guys are all misogynists, and people would have bought that. And they aren't now. And I think there's a thing to be said. I think the men's rights movement is the difference there. People are aware of this kind of thing, and they don't have the tolerance for it that they did 10 years ago.
10 years ago, there was a young lady named Makosi who claimed she was raped in the house. She was called a liar ever since, and she's never rescinded. I used to watch that show. Sorry, I used to be young and have time on my hands, and I didn't have the internet.
And probably was she ever really condemned though for lying about it?
Oh yeah, some people were some people in the crowd were chanting "liar" as she came out of the house, because they do these live shows when they come out.
Yeah. But she never rescinded it. She never got any other backlash. She,
I don't
there
know.
weren't.
Not to my knowledge. No.
See, this blew up.
She's an African lady, by the way. She's got extra victim points. And another thing
boy.
happened on Celebrity Big Brother. Does anyone remember Jade Goody? Only British people will remember.
Yeah,
I was gonna say I don't even know who that is.
She was originally a normal Big Brother contestant, and then she became a celebrity, and then she went into the Celebrity Big Brother house. That was about 2007, I think. And there was Shilpa Shetty, the Indian actress, was in there as well. And Jade Goody, while having one of her, while bitching with her friends, referred to her as, Shilpa fucking Papadom. And this was headline news for weeks. Racism in the Big Brother house. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, and she wasn't. Yeah, she didn't just apologize. She broke down in tears, and then died of cancer a couple of years later. So
I looked her up and I saw the cancer pictures. Yeah.
Yeah, she was fed to the SJW horde back in 2007.
That's how she got cancer.
No,
those were just cancer.
Sorry. I don't mean to speak ill of the dead. I just turned into V. Monroe for a moment, and I had to make a joke. So sorry. Too soon? But yeah. So this woman has crazy eyes, and I'm glad that people are holding her accountable, and that she has, at the very least, realize it. You in a time like this where they're trying to make. They're talking about making misogyny illegal. It's probably not good to accuse people of shit that they didn't fucking do. And one might ask, should she be penalized? I don't know. But that's something that you guys... I mean, it depends on whether she was trying to, actually carry this all the way through the legal system, or if she was just making a stupid accusation on TV. I
actually have an answer on that myself.
Yeah, go ahead.
If something's not a criminal act, it shouldn't be made a criminal act unless you can demonstrate there's a victim of it. If there was damage done to this guy, that's a different story. If he loses career opportunities because this woman slandered him, well, there's laws that cover that, and they should be followed. But I don't believe in outlawing misogyny, and I think it's stupid, and I don't believe in outlawing misandry, and I think that's stupid too. People are allowed to have opinions. People are allowed to basically be rude, obnoxious cunts. People are allowed to be assholes, and it should not be illegal to be an asshole, because you'll be outlawing probably the majority of the population in their average and worst moments. So it's ridiculous to outlaw things like catcalling. It's ridiculous to outlaw looking at people, and it is ridiculous to outlaw and actually criminalize, rumors and stupidity, overreactions and stuff like that. It's not ridiculous to have legal repercussions if your actions actually cause somebody damages. But it is ridiculous if you just to outlaw hurting people's feelings.
And isn't misogyny like a thought? It's not even an action, right? So I know we're not at this story yet, but if you make misogyny a crime, that's literally a thought crime, isn't it? Yeah. Have you done that for any other group? Racism is a hot topic, but it's not actually a crime in and of itself, is it? You have to actually do something. And you can actually make misogyny in itself. Just any action at all can be attributed to misogyny. Or you blew your nose on the wrong colored handkerchief. That's misogyny.
You turned up the air conditioning level. Well,
prostitution is a thought crime too, but
we'll get to that.
Everyone who organized the Sadiq Khan balloon was a misogynist because of the bikini. The bikini makes it misogynist. Therefore, that free speech does not extend. But the Trump balloon was fine, because who cares about babies, right?
Right. Okay, I got some super chats, and then we'll move on. And Capistan, French Honey Badger, gives us $5 and says, Doc, OMG, did you just round in the room for inspiration and saw a teaspoon on your desk? I don't get it. but I read it.
It's a reference to a cartoon I did.
Ah, yes. John Taylor, £10, says, even on Loose Women, of all programs, panelist Denise Welsh went off on a very red-pilled rant against Roxanne Pallett. A surprising moment of lucidity from mainstream daytime gynocentric TV. Quite interesting. Field to Bears gives us $5 and says, the craziest eyes belong to Alexandria Octagonal Cortez. I like to call her Alexandria Maria Conchita Alonso Cortez, because it lets me use the name Maria Conchita Alonso, actress from the 1980s. And Jonathan Taylor, John Taylor, rather, gives us £2 again and says, oh, and happy birthday, Brian. 3 beer mug emojis. Well, thank you. Yes, today is my birthday. Okay, so, and I'm working. Thanks, Alison.
Birthday, Ryan. I'm not going to say happy birthday.
Birthday.
I'm not gonna dictate your emotions to you. Just birthday.
Have a birthday.
Have a birthday.
Just birthday. Hi,
Yeah.
Brian. Birthday. You don't
Hi,
even
Mike.
have to have it.
No,
Just birthday.
I can choose
There you
to
go.
have it or not have it. I appreciate the
You old fart.
the way that you're treating this. You have no idea. Okay.
Yeah,
We're
I
gonna.
think it's around about the age of 21 that people get sick of birthdays. Or that's
Something
the
like
last.
that.
That's 22, I should say.
Yeah, that's
Well,
about
I
right.
don't know,
I
in
think.
the US, a lot of people get sick on their 21st birthday.
Yeah. Okay. Let us move on to the next story. Progressive Steam Team. Okay. Finally, a problem that is affecting us all so much. It's been addressed by the United Nations. Thomas the Tank Engine is embracing gender neutrality.
It's about time.
It's
damn it.
about time. It's the current year +4, and it's about time. Actually, +3. But we're getting close
you
to
put the
+4.
picture up. Uncanny Valley. I'm not looking. Tank engine.
This is where it needed to happen.
It just occurred to me there's a 34 for this. There's a furry equivalent of
I'm
this
not.
out there somewhere.
No. I'm not even.
There
looking.
is
I
so
bet
much
they even
out
have-
there.
They must have flashlight version.
Oh my god. So from the Independent, Thomas the Tank Engine launches gender-balanced, multicultural Steam Team. Because this is so important.
And Thomas the Tank Engine wasn't horrifying enough.
No.
If no one's copyrighted or started releasing like flashlights with Thomas the Tank Engine tops that you kind of just unscrew and fuck. I'm doing it now. I'm getting the patent on it right now. I'm doing it. I'm gonna make millions.
Do it now. It doesn't have to be good
Joe Rogan's
drawings.
podcast took off.
They don't have to be good drawings. After years of accusations, this is from the Independent, okay? After years of accusations of sexism, racism, and classism, Thomas the Tank Engine has now been updated for 2018. Classism?
Christ.
Classism. I like us. I gotta say this real quick. I like how they're letting us know that they're doing multicultural because this train that's pictured here is from Africa. Do you know how I know? Because it's got kente patterns all over it, and that's what Africans like. But this isn't racist at all. This is totally not. Because everyone in Africa likes these patterns. All right. The children's TV show based on the books by Reverend? Is that what the Rev stands for? I guess. I was too old for Thomas the Tank Engine, to be honest. So, by Reverend Wilbert Audrey, has been revamped, and a brand new series launches next week featuring multicultural characters. They're trains! And female protagonists. Also
To be fair,
trains!
All they are they're just trains with names. All you have to give them is a name and a voice, I suppose. A voice that Ringo Starr can do.
Yeah. Or George Carlin, because, he used to be on there. He was a conductor, right? George Carlin used to be on that show. The new show boasts to be gender balanced and hopes, quote, this will boost appeal amongst female viewers with girls representing more than 40% of the show's viewership. So wait a minute. It's going to boost appeal, but girls are already represented in viewership by more than 40% on a show that would likely just based on what the content is, attract more boys. But I guess it's not enough to be almost equal. You have to be all the way, if not more than equal. Other changes include a more contemporary feel, faster paced action, increased humor and music, animals, funny elements, or fantasy elements, and dream sequences. And Thomas will break the fourth wall for the first time, and take up the role of series narrator. The creators of the show... Yes.
For everybody else that doesn't like this animation style, just like me, this is going to be even more horrifying. It's bad enough that it looks creepy to begin with, but now it's going to talk to you.
Oh, yeah. This is, Jesus. All right. Where was I? Oh, yeah. So other changes include a more contemporary feel, faster paced action. I already read that. The creators of the show also collaborated with the United Nations. So the UN got involved with making the show to promote their sustainable development goals, focusing on gender equality in Thomas the Tank Engine, life on land, responsible consumption and production, sustainable cities and communities, and quality education. Ian McHugh, senior producer of the show, told The Independent, "The changes and new additions of characters and geographies will make the show more entertaining, inclusive, and global, while ensuring all the favorite characters and storylines that fans around the world love remain at the heart of the action." A comment on the article summarizes my feelings well. They're effing trains, for God's sake. And I have my own commentary on this. I think that I would be okay with this new direction for Thomas the Tank Engine, provided they change the intro to sound like this.
Niggas do. Man, the motherfuckers was ready for anything. The niggas was packing burners. The niggas was ready to fight. Whatever they had to do, Holmes. The niggas was on the real flip mode, Holmes. They was coming out like a motherfucker.
Oh, I know what
the
this
nigga was
is.
amped. He was like, come on, motherfucker. Come on, motherfuckers, come on. Come on, motherfuckers, come on. Yeah. Come on, motherfuckers, come on. Come on, motherfuckers, come on. Release the brainstorm to make the motherfucking brain warm. A strange form.
So I think that would make it just right. I think it'd be beautiful, actually. I would watch it. I would watch it every day. If they just change the intro. So, anyway, I don't really look, do whatever you want. I think it's just funny. I thought I would share it because I think it's funny. I don't really care what they do with this show. I don't have kids. I don't watch this shit. But, I don't know. Like, it just sounds stupid to me. Those are my thoughts. I think it's stupid. It's a train. They're trains. They're not gendered. They don't have genders. They don't have races. They're just trains. That's all it was. But go ahead, Hannah. You go ahead and have your thoughts. I'm gonna get another coffee.
Okay, so I raised kids, and that meant watching kid shows on TV for a certain number of years. And then my kids were grown up, and now I work with intellectually disabled adults. And that means sometimes watching kids shows on TV now. And holy shit, those shows have been dumbed down, and they have turned into exactly what was predicted in Fahrenheit 451. I don't know if people who read that book, they usually remember the censorship, and they don't usually remember that the book was about the dumbing down of society. It wasn't about censorship. Censorship was part of the story, and it was an important part of the story. But the real story was the idea that being able to think for yourself and being independent and actually making your own decisions using logic and reason and stuff like that was looked down on and forbidden by the government. And that was why they got rid of books. Well, there was a part of the story where the main character's wife, and it's like I read this in high school, so I'm not going to remember all the names, but the main character's wife is all excited because the television that they have, which takes up an entire wall, so big screen TVs were predicted in that book as well. The television they have, the broadcast is going to include a show that is going to include the viewer. by name. And it goes on to describe this. She's watching, and in the middle of the program, it says something like, "What do you think?" and then says her name, and all the characters turn and look at her, and then she freezes, if I remember right, and can't answer or something. And then it goes on, and she gets all excited. "Oh, they included me! They included me!" That is what is being done in children's programming now. Like, the characters will stop and look at you and wait for you to answer. And it is like everything in these shows is incredibly dumb. It's it's not like Sesame Street was, or The Electric Company when I was a kid, where they ask you questions to get you to think, but they just go on. It's not the characters don't act like you answered them. The characters don't act like they're interacting with you because they're on television and you're not. And they're fictional, and it's the fiction is maintained. This is a totally different thing. It's like it's acclimating children to take instruction with and consider themselves to be interacting with a character on a screen. And it's very disturbing to watch it happen. And I don't know. This is just a continuation of that. And part of the reason it's disturbing to me is it sort of acclimates young people to the idea of having their home sort of invaded by an outside authority that they are led to think of as observing them and responding to their actions in their homes. Now, what is the plan for that? What is the idea behind that? This is not something benevolent. And the more shows start doing this, the more disturbing it looks to me. And the more shows start doing it with a combination of, not so much non-educational, but just dumbed down, like non-thinking, call and response kind of shit. The more they do that, the more this strikes me as a deliberate attempt to indoctrinate kids and to indoctrinate them to accept something that in the long run is very dangerous. So
especially with the UN factor, that's definitely like, because it looks like they're coming at this from this globalist perspective, and the UN are, I don't want to sound like Alex Jones too much, but fucking globalists.
Oh, I will come right out and sound like Alex Jones on this. This doesn't seem like an accidental thing at all to me. This seems very deliberate and guided, and it is. It seems like it's an attempt to indoctrinate and an attempt to prepare kids for what is described in 1984, in which your television, tells you what to do when you get up in the morning. Your monitor tells you what to do when you get up in the morning, and if you don't do it, they know.
The Fat Controller used to just be a character in Thomas the Tank Engine. What are they changing the Fat Controller to be more PC? The fat straight controller.
Is that the guy with the
straight patriarchal dominator?
Yeah, is that the guy with the top hat? It's like okay. Topham Hat? That's his name. Yeah, Topham Hat.
I always wondered, even when I was a kid, like, what's his name? Why do we call him the Fat Controller? Is that just... I think it's just a worker boss thing. Like, they want to get kids into the mindset of the workers rather than the boss. And the workers refer to the boss as the Fat Controller, I guess.
Yeah, I guess.
Insert Marxist crazy theory here.
If I was running this show, I would have made all of the trains male and all of the tunnels female. And then let them with little faces over the top of the tunnel, just like the creepy train faces, and let them deal with that.
Geez, as much as I make fun of the animation style, I really do. This really does look like there's something about the way the faces especially the older style of Thomas the Tank. I couldn't even stand the books. My brother had one of those books, and every time I came into the room with it when I was a kid, I would turn it over so that the author on the back or the text on the back was what was showing, and not the train with the face on the front. I couldn't stand it. But the whole thing that's going on with this is something to watch. Pay attention. And I'm thinking now that the people in the movement need to go back and start rereading these books. We need to go back and reread Fahrenheit
See what
451, 1984, Brave New World, all of these dystopian novels, and start looking around us, because I'm seeing stuff all the time from this type of dystopian story. And it's really, really disturbing.
Well, I would say that if you have kids, or you work with kids or something, find out what they're watching. If they're watching this stuff, then just make sure talk to them about what they're watching, see what it is they're picking up, and maybe give them another perspective. Like if I had kids and they were watching daytime TV, like children's television, I'd be involved with what they were watching. And if they were watching stuff like this, I might watch it with them and see what the messages are. And then if I think that it's, pushing some ideas that I don't like, then I'll give them additional information. I'll be involved with the process, because you don't want TV to raise your kids and entertainment to raise your kids. And a lot of people do it, especially when you live in a country where there is such a problem of single parenting, where there are, there's a lot of single moms out there. So the majority of single parents are mothers. So, and they're using television to keep their kids busy while they do other things like manage the house, work a job, etc. And when those kids go to school, a lot of times the caregivers, the daytime, nurseries, or the children's care daycare centers, they'll put them in front of the TV and they'll have them watch stuff like this. So you need to be involved with your kids, so that because it's like, we can't stop the UN from making these shows, because they're going to do it they're going to try and appropriate everything they can that's popular with children and shove their messages into the stuff, right? So the only thing we can do, I think, is to either not watch it and tank the ratings, or get involved with what they're watching so that they learn the values that we think they should be getting, and challenge the ones that these people are putting out. So honestly, that's what I think.
I could tell you what I did. You take your kids outside. That's the first thing. Your kids need outdoor time, period. There's no question about that. It's actually documented that they need time to play outdoors. They need reduced screen time. We watched some kids shows, and it was like my son didn't watch TV by himself. When my daughters were at our house, they didn't just sit around in front of the TV by themselves either. It was a kind of a family activity. I didn't watch TV by myself when I was a kid. I watched Hogan's Heroes with my dad. I watched WKRP in Cincinnati with my dad. I watched MASH when I was a little kid with my dad. And that's you don't use TV as a babysitter. You can't use TV as a babysitter. It doesn't babysit. It mesmerizes. And kids learn lessons from everything they're exposed to. And you don't just set them off to go do things. You spend time with them and you become part of those lessons. But we went outside. We didn't watch a lot of the kids shows. There was stuff that if it came on television, the channel got changed. We didn't watch a lot of the TV shows that were indoctrinating and stuff. But there was other stuff we watched. The 8-hour long thing, little segments of the 8-hour long thing they made back when he was a little kid, of when dinosaurs ruled the earth. What was that like? They'd done an animated, this is what dinosaurs probably looked like. And it was just this 8-hour long show of dinosaurs wandering around and doing things. No real storyline necessarily, just slice of life. And so, you take 5 or 10 minutes that we're going to watch dinosaurs for 5 or 10 minutes. And then you just don't rewind the tape. And so it's like a different show every time you turn it on. or we played with toys, we played with Bionicles, we played with Legos, we played with all kinds of stuff like that. We played with cardboard boxes, but we didn't sit around and interact with television shows that the characters talked to the living room, and the people in the living room were supposed to talk back. And we watched anime. And we listened to the radio, and we went places and did things, and this idea of plopping your kid's butt in front of the television and having the television be their school until they get into school, and you just go off and do things and leave them to pick up whatever they're going to pick up from that, where you hear that video games are dangerous. And by the way, we played video games together too. My son learned to read. I've said this before. He learned to read playing Breath of Fire 3. But the idea that you just plop a kid in front of a form of entertainment, a little kid in front of a form of entertainment, and let that be what he learns everything from, is ridiculous. If you're going to do that, why bother becoming a parent? Like, the exciting thing about being a parent is being there for your children's development, being there for them becoming the people they're going to be, and influencing that in the best way that you can. Why waste that opportunity on a television?
Well, I've got my plan. I haven't got any kids, so I've figured out my angle of protest. It's the flashlights. Fucking big rubber Thomas that you fuck in the face, or screw his face off and fuck its insides. If you're going to turn Thomas into an abomination of adult perversions, so am I, and my idea is better. We'll see who makes more money. That's my project. That's my baby.
You're going to get
the wank engine.
Yeah,
I've coined it. It's Thomas the Wank Engine. I own it. Make it if you like. I at least want to mention.
You got to make that real. It's gonna make trillions. You're gonna wreck the economy. It's gonna be so good.
And I have a new topic for my nightmares.
One more time, just in case it was missed.
Now I have a new topic for my nightmares.
Go ahead, Mike.
No, I'm done. I'm just reiterating the same funny idea. I think I've milked it to death now.
Yes, Thomas the Wank Engine. Make it real. Make it happen. That's all. That's what this story is worth. Thomas the Wank Engine. That's basically that is the best thing that's come out of this show today. Perhaps even this year. All right, so let's go through the super chats and then we'll move on. And Capistan, French Honey Badger, gives us $5 and says, anti-human, socialist, environmentalist, deindustrialization propaganda, in response to Thomas the Wank Engine. Frenchinator 2 gives us $2. Thank you, sir. It says, so idiocracy equals Fahrenheit 451. They were right. And Capistan again for $5 says, wasn't the fat controller the villain in the show? I have no idea.
It's the closest they had to a villain. I think he was an authority.
Well, that was one other thing that they did say. I guess in the show, the trains would argue a lot. They'd be arguing, they get like pissy with each other, and then they'd resolve things. In this one, there's no arguing. The trains never fight. They just get along and work together, and they're always friendly. So there's less conflict between trains. So there's less conflict resolution, I guess. I don't know. But it's
Mussolini.
So maybe he was
supposed to be Mussolini. That's why he was fat.
Oh yeah, possibly.
He made the trains run on time. It's all fascist propaganda.
I thought because he was like a guy in a black suit with a top hat that he was like some rich capitalist, and that was why he was evil. Because that's what they look like. They're like fat guys in suits with top hats, right? Maybe a monocle. Big mustache.
They got the giant bag with the $ sign on it.
Yes, but it's okay as long as you have your get out of jail free card.
Yes, exactly. Sir Topham Hatt. That's right. That's the guy we're talking about. Fat Controller. I guess that's a name that some versions of the show must call him. I thought his name was Topham Hatt. Psy Berserk gives us 50 secs and says, "Coward Chicken gave me hope for Canada." Thank you, sir. And Frenchinator 2 gives another $5 and says, "From Fahrenheit 451, I got government control of information and putting people into unquestioning obedience." That's definitely what we're seeing.
That's what it was
with
about.
The Thomas thing. Yes, that's definitely what we're seeing. So, be critical, raise your kids, don't let the TV tell them what to believe. All right.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that your kids can't watch TV or the television is going to control your kids, but it's just like anything else. You still have to parent your kids yourself. It's not a substitute.
True that. All right, so next story, we are going to be talking about... There's this big thing happening, and I don't know much about it, but Andrew G has filled me. He's filling us in. League of Legends subreddit criticizes Riot Games. Rioter calls players man babies. This is a big story. Everyone's talking about it right now. Riot Games, maker of the multiplayer online battle arena game League of Legends, has been under some pressure lately. In a Kotaku article posted last month, current and former employees criticized the company for being a toxic environment towards women and minorities. I'm going to pause there for a moment. As I understand it, League of Legends is toxic to everyone. In fact, I heard League of Legends is the most toxic community of all communities, and also really popular with women. They might be a part of it. I know, it's crazy. But let's continue. Since then, Riot has published an article called Our First Steps Forwards, in which they apologized to a whole host of people and created some tasks going forward for the company. These tasks include expanding the Culture, Diversity, and Inclusion Initiative, revisiting cultural definitions, third-party evaluations of Riot's culture, evaluating and improving their investigation process, re-evaluating recruiting, doubling down on trainings, and finally staffing their diversity and inclusion initiative with a chief human resources officer and a chief diversity officer. Well, RIP Riot Games. But let me continue with the write-up. I just know that sounds like Anita got her hands in there or something. However, seemingly going against their promises to be more inclusive, Riot Games had a room at PAX West specifically for women and non-binary people only from 2:30 to 4 p.m., after which men would be allowed in. Some topics that were covered include art and champion skins design, how to be a producer, narrative writing, production careers, and game design. In response, the League of Legends subreddit heavily criticized the move by Riot Games in dozens of threads with several thousand upvotes each. Many satirical pieces were written, such as creating a ranked queue for only women/non-binary people in which male champions would not be allowed to be played. Several rioters, that's the company, have responded to the drama. Daniel Z. Klein, a systems designer, tweeted that, quote, "The reason that sexism against men makes no sense as a concept is that men have the power. There's privilege in so many ways, from small invisible things to large outrageous things, like a confessed abuser and harasser, like Louis C.K. can just have a comeback and that's fine, because he should just be out of work forever. And, quote, if you ever had to think about this privilege for a minute in your life, congratulations, you're privileged as fuck and have been benefiting from a system that makes the lives of other people hell. I sincerely hope these man babies crying in that thread will grow up someday." Froskurin, a color caster for the LPL, tweeted that, quote, "Minorities walk through this white cis male controlled world, not knowing the privilege and entitlement the absolute inclusion creates. By facilitating spaces for them, it helps give opportunity and balance to discussions with a welcoming space. This is not a personal attack to you." She followed up with, quote, "And not every woman or non-binary person needs these spaces to help find their voice and feel comfortable using it, but some do. That's their purpose, to help pull more minorities up to feel entitled and heard. Some in the esports scene, such as Kelsey Moser, analyst for the European LCS team H2K, I don't know what any of this means, tweeted that, quote, "RE PAX sexism discussion. I don't oppose and occasionally support career outreaches that target women in gaming. Events with a career in gaming bent that exclude men, Events with a career in gaming bent that exclude men reinforce an archaic idea that women cannot coexist with men professionally. It is not the solution. She responded to someone saying that there is supposedly a large number of women excluded by the very presence of men, just by being there. And they said that, quote, this kind of idea makes sexist toxicity a strictly gendered problem, when in my experience, it's not. Oh, Kelsey. So, Riot Games tries to satisfy people, ends up satisfying nobody. It just goes to shit. I know it's a lot to take in. Anybody have any thoughts? Thoughts?
Right off the bat, I know there's a lot of people already championing for the prophecy of get woke, go broke to occur, but, and I hate to say this, I really don't think it's going to happen to Riot Games anytime soon. As far as I know, they have been like this for years. Like, this isn't even out of the norm for them. And yet, people keep coming back.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty cancerous. And you know what? That's fine. Like, people want to keep going back. I think it will eventually bite them in the ass. I think the thing about League of Legends, I never played it, but I had a girlfriend who did a few years ago, and she was the one who told me she wanted me to get into it, but at the same time, she was like, this is the most toxic community, but I can't stop playing. And she was actually one of the most, she was a toxic element, you know, of that community, which is really funny because it's so competitive. That's from what I understand. It's very competitive, and people are shitty to each other. But I'm never gonna, that's just not for me. So I guess at the end of the day, you know, if the community is what you, if that's your thing, go ahead and do it. I think with what Mike J is saying, we would like the get woke, go broke thing to happen with them. But I think that Riot seems to be in a slightly unique position at the moment that it does not appear to affect them enough to matter. Part of it is the fact that League of Legends is free to play, maybe, but I don't really know. All I know is that they're, from what I hear, this is reminiscent of the stuff that I was hearing from other game development companies like Ubisoft and Bethesda, who have been working with Anita Sarkeesian to develop games in the future, and they are putting these sort of, making these HR changes and these diversity departments to better sort of satisfy that market, I put in quotes, to people that they're being told they need to put in. And I don't think it's going to work out for them, but it may. I don't know how this is going to work out for Riot. At the end of the day, it's just like, if you can keep making a good product, I guess so.
What we mean by get broke, go woke isn't universal. For instance, Anita Sarkeesian got woke and didn't go broke. As a matter of fact, she makes money from it. If there's people losing money from getting woke, it's because there's other people out there making money from getting woke. And that's what we mean. If you're a company that isn't supposed to deal in gender politics, you're supposed to deal in some kind of product, like games or something, then if you do what the gender studies hench people say, then you will go broke, and they will take your place in the fucking rat race. Get me? They're fucking bloodsuckers. They will get fat and healthy, and you will go broke and die.
You can't get woke if you were woke from the start.
Taps forehead.
Anita was born woke.
Honestly, the whole get woke, go broke idea. I'm gonna get a little conspiratorial here. Surprise, surprise, because you know I never do that, right? But there's money behind the whole get woke idea. We know that. Everybody knows, for instance, about George Soros. Everybody knows that there is money invested into manipulation of society politically through initiatives like this and ideas like this, and the promotion of beliefs that are essentially victim narratives used to control people. Everybody knows that. It's not a mystery. It's not hidden. It's not a secret. So as far as the money end of it is concerned, I don't even really look so much at that. I mean, we can do that as far as we don't have to support this stuff. We don't have to support being told that we have to believe a certain way by an entertainment company, and we shouldn't. And we can have an impact with some companies, but the fact that there is being put toward this, and I'm not saying that this company specifically is getting money from George Soros or anything like that. That's not what this is about. But there's always going to be someone out there willing to support this shit. The thing that really bothers me about this, and the thing that I've brought up and discussed publicly about this, and even talked about on HBR Talk, is the fact that what's going on in this situation and other situations like it is you have a political mentality, progressivism, social justice ideology, victim politics, whatever you want to call it. But you have an ideology that takes groups that are designated victims, minorities, LGBT, women. I happen to be a part of at least 2 of those groups, and depending on how prejudiced you are, I might be part of a 3rd one. But they exploit those groups for political power and money. They whore us out as proxy victims, and if you question the narrative, the idea that, hey, I'm not a victim, I can do things myself, I don't need to be coddled, I don't need a special segment within the environment to be part of the environment, I don't need something set aside for me because I'm female. None of that, right? If you object to that, you are non-personed immediately.
Especially in Canada.
That is what got us kicked out of Calgary Expo. We got non-personed for refusing the victim narrative. And what I'm seeing in this situation, because I actually managed to have a conversation with a blue check twit on Twitter, and I was being sarcastic, partly because I figured, blue check mark, this person's not going to answer me, and he did. Chris, don't be garbage, Pollock answered me and tried to convince me that being a woman is a handicap. Like this was great, honestly. I actually got told by a man, by a liberal man, well, not really liberal, progressive, because liberal men wouldn't try to do this, but I got told by a progressive man what it's like to be a woman and how horrible it is and how intimidating men are to women. Just like every other feminist man who talks to me, I got told how important it is to coddle women in professional areas because we have to be scared of men, so scared of men that we become incompetent in our professions when men are around us. I mean, can you imagine how insulting and degrading it is to be told by men that we are supposed to be afraid of men, that we are supposed to be incompetent because men are looking at us? I mean, Jesus Christ, can you imagine the ridiculousness of sitting there hearing a man in a professional area say, "Oh, you're a woman. You can't possibly know what it's like to be a woman. Your experience is irrelevant because we think women are so intimidated by men and so weak and so helpless and so fragile that when men are around, you have to become incompetent in your profession." And that was his way of excusing discriminating against men. And that's what it basically is. When you have a professional activity, a professional environment, whether it's surrounding a hobby or whether it's surrounding something that is considered more productive by the rest of society because they don't recognize that hobbies can be productive. And you create a safe space for one gender, but the other gender doesn't get one. That is discriminatory. And what really blows my mind is the excuses that they're using for this are parallel to what James Damore got in trouble, got fired from Google for saying. Only when he said it, he didn't say it in a way that indicated that women were weak and helpless and stupid and shouldn't be in the profession with men that had to be coddled. He talked about the fact that tokenism, which is what this company is engaging in, that tokenism is not a solution to the problems that come up if diversifying your workforce is a goal. He talked about the fact that tokenism is not a productive way to address that. And he's right. It's not an effective way to address that because it perpetuates the problems that prevent you from diversifying your workforce, if that is your goal. And geez, these guys act like as long as we say it for the right reasons, it's all right. Well, it's not. You cannot turn around and treat an entire population, an entire gender, like just by virtue of being part of that sex, you're handicapped, right? Like being female is a handicap, and use that as an excuse to divide men and women and drive a wedge between men and women and discriminate against men for the purported benefit of women, and then castigate women for not wanting that discrimination, for not supporting that discrimination. You can't do that and expect to be taken seriously complaining about being called out on it. And if you want to have a workplace where you have gendered spaces, have gendered spaces for both sexes. And it's not necessarily bad to do that for productivity. It's bad to do it and then claim your reason for doing it is because being female is a handicap and being male is an attack on women. That's what's bad. That's what everybody is upset about. That's why people are yelling about this. That's why there is controversy. Not because women had their own space, but because in order for women to have their own space, you guys thought you had to disparage men and women in order to create that space. You don't have to do that. And it's insulting every time you do it. But, you know, they're never going to listen to that unless we basically reject it every time they do it.
Mm-hmm.
When someone treats a disabled, well, if someone treats a disabled person like they're able-bodied, if someone just goes, oh, for God's sake, get out of the wheelchair, you lazy bum, and walk across the stairs like everyone else, we would consider that a kind of lunacy, to treat an obviously disabled person like they're perfectly able. Luckily, almost no one like that, as bad as that, actually exists, except other people who are mentally disabled in some way. But the opposite of the spectrum would be treating a perfectly able person like they're disabled. That would be just as much like lunatic behavior. And yeah, that's what we're looking at, and it's all over the place. Treating perfectly able-bodied, perfectly, dare I say, privileged people like their very existence is handicapped. Mm-hmm. Without sufficient, reason to believe this, other than dogma. Ugh.
I got a couple super chats, and then we'll move on. French Nader 2 gives us $2 and says, several layers of cancer. I imagine in relation to League of Legends. Mr. Roboto gives us $2 and says, games like Feminist Quest. You mean Depression Quest? Same, I guess it's the same thing. Mr. Roboto gives us another $2 and says, feminists said it first, so not his fault. Thank you for the donations, guys. Sorry about the connection. I don't know. It was like kind of dipping in and out, but on my end, it was fine. And my connection with everybody here. And I got a recording, so I can upload the recording of the video anyway. That way, you know, you guys won't, you could watch it over and not miss this section. If it dips again, you'll have a full recording regardless, but it's not my end. My internet connection is good. So something about from when it leaves OBS and goes out into the internet, somewhere in there's a problem, I guess. Maybe it's YouTube, but it's Twitch too, so I don't get it. Anyway, let us move on to the next story. California legislators want to mandate a woman on every publicly traded company board. Good old California. California legislators passed a bill last week that would mandate that every publicly traded company with headquarters in California would need to have a woman on their board of directors, else face a penalty. The bill has yet to be signed into law by Governor Jerry Brown, but if so, California would be the first U.S. state to have such a law on the books. Other European countries have already taken steps to force companies to have more diverse boards of directors. Vicky W. Kramer, lead author for the study, quote, Critical Mass on Corporate Boards, end quote, said that without quotas, companies will fail to diversify. Pennsylvania legislators passed a resolution last year to encourage companies to have at least 30% of women on their boards by 2020. However, this resolution did not force or penalize companies. Kramer says that, quote, that's the big thing. Will it change the numbers? It takes a lot of pressure, but that has to be sustained pressure, and so far, it hasn't been enough. Kramer says that she would rather see a percentage quota for the legislation similar to other European countries. She said that, quote, one is definitely not enough, but at least with companies that have none, to at least just get one, then let's go from there. But one is not enough. One is a token. Anna Benninger, Senior Research Director and Corporate Engagement Partner at Catalyst, a nonprofit studying women and work, says that, quote, what we see in Europe is once these mandatory quotas have been in place, there's been a significant increase. In essence, when organizations are required to make progress, required to follow these regulations, they do, and the progress happens. When the legislation passed, California State Senator Hannah Beth Jackson told the Wall Street Journal that, quote, 1/4 of California's publicly traded companies still do not have a single woman on their board, despite numerous independent studies that show companies with women on the board are more profitable and productive. I'd love to see that study. With women comprising more than half the population and making over 70% of purchasing decisions, 80%. Their insight is critical to discussions and decisions that affect corporate culture, actions, and profitability.
You know, all you need to do is get some of your male board members to identify as women, yeah, and then they'll be trans as well. So you got that in the in whatever quota you need to meet. And
that's
you can't
as
just
good
say,
as like 3 women right there.
Yeah, you can't just say you're not women. That's transphobia. So
They could even
just a case of which one of us is going to bite the bullet, guys. All right, Fred, you need to identify as a woman from now on. Okay, fair enough. What do I need to do? Nothing. Literally nothing. Just identify as a woman. That is technically good enough for these people by their own goddamn rules.
they don't even have to identify as a woman all the time. And that basically what non-binary is you feel like one sex one day and another sex another day, and it's all good. So, you know, they only have to identify as a woman when they're at work. But this is hilarious. They don't understand what tokenism is.
Well, no, like if it's one, that's
the idea that if you engage in more tokenism, it's not tokenism. Does that translate into other words? Like if we decide to engage in more sexism, that's not sexism, right? So we can discriminate against all of the women because we've increased it, so it's not sexism anymore. It's just normal.
Yeah, this is pathetic. That's it. This is just sad. Imagine being the woman who got picked to be on the board because you're a woman. Would you really feel good about yourself doing that
that's
job?
not insulting or anything.
No.
You're only here because you're a what's it called? A diversity hire. You're not really qualified for this job.
Yeah, most women would feel uncomfortable in a position like that, but naturally they find the one woman. Well, the one woman who ends up getting the job is the kind of woman who thinks, "Yep, I absolutely deserve to be here." Yeah, they make the best bosses, women like that.
Well,
Yeah.
and then when nobody takes her seriously because they all know she's a diversity hire, she writes that large over all of society and is like, women don't get taken seriously in the workplace because they're women. And believes that that's everybody's experience and believes that it's a sexist thing. And of course, all of the other women who have been diversity hired and people know they're diversity hires and know they're not qualified for their jobs and know they're not competent to do their jobs and don't take them seriously are just not taking them seriously because they're women. It has nothing to do with the fact that they were not hired on merit.
I'd like to see this study that shows that they are claiming shows that companies with women on their boards are more profitable and more productive. How? How?
Well, it's because they fired the man and they can pay the woman less. Boom, more profit right there.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I guess I think that I'd like to see that study. I'm gonna look into that study and Aiden and I are gonna go through it. God damn it, because I'm curious about that, and that's got my attention. And as far as women comprising over half the population, obviously that's true, and making over 70% of purchasing decisions, their insight is critical to discussions and decisions that affect corporate culture. No, but you're right about the making over 70% of purchasing decisions. Not only that, but 80%, and most money is not only spent by women, but it is spent on behalf of women, whether it is voluntary or not through taxation. So,
speaking of voluntary or not, and you think about this, part of the reason, and this is documented, the CONSAD report explained this as part of its explanation on the supposed wage gap that's actually an earnings gap. But part of the reason why there are fewer female CEOs, fewer female managers, fewer females on boards, and so on, is because that's not the type of work women go in for. There have been companies that have specifically tried to hire female CEOs and can't find anybody that wants the job. And if they're going to mandate that these companies have a percentage of their boards be women, and we don't have enough women wanting to be on these boards, to sit on these boards, to actually do the work that's necessary to sit on the boards and sacrifice their work-life balance to be a part of these boards, then they're going to have to turn around and start mandating a certain percentage of women take these jobs, aren't they? If they're going to make this work, might not even to mention the fact that this is massive lawsuit material the minute that somebody doesn't get the job because they're not a woman or don't identify as a woman. But this just starts a trip down the rabbit hole of people are not allowed to make their own choices. People are not allowed to determine their own relationships with the business that they work for, and business owners are not allowed to determine the relationship between their business and the employee. In other words, the state controls everything. This is just another step toward socialism.
Imagine if this happened with the school baseball teams. One day, schools went, okay, From now on, boys and girls can try out for the baseball team. Come on, girls. Crickets.
Oh,
you know.
it did. It has. It happened with football teams.
Did they actually end up like going, okay, so no girls want to play baseball, but you two, we're going to force you two to this team so
No.
there's at least 2 girls on this team, but we don't want to. The fucking ball hurts. It's cold out here. You have to.
You know what they did? You know
it's
what they
equality.
did? On university campuses, there's been a problem in the United States for the last 20 years of men's Olympic type sports like Olympic wrestling, Olympic gymnastics being shut down because not enough women wanted to play sports on university campuses. So the Title IX, what Title IX was prior to using it to create this false accusation culture on university campuses that we have now, was initially it was about academics, and then it expanded to sports, and they created this 3-point test system that really was only 1 point, and it was quotas. If you didn't have exactly the same percentage of the female population on campus involved in girls' sports as the percentage of the male population on campus involved in men's sports, then you were discriminating against the ladies, and you had to shut down some of the men's sports. And it was obviously only because those men's sports existed that fewer women were interested in sports. And as soon as you shut down some of those men's sports, instant gender parity, right? Except the reason is because men are more interested in sports. Once girls get out of high school, once they grow up, they become women. Our bodies are not the same as men's. We sort of develop in ways that are not ergonomic in terms of certain types of sports. I peaked, I guess, my freshman year in high school in hurdles, running the hurdles, and I was 4th in my league, which is not that much. I mean, I ran with a state champion. And I'm not sure I would have even been 4th in my league had I not had that state champion to challenge me. But a lot of the gals I ran with peaked their freshman, sophomore, junior years, and then went downhill from there. And a lot of gals, once you hit adulthood, once you get through that adolescence, a lot of female athletics, a lot of women drop out of it. And that's not wrong. That's fine. Women are supposed to be able to make their own choices, right? Unless, it contradicts the feminist narrative. And the feminist narrative is men and women want the same things, and we have to like the same things, and we have to want to do the same things, or we're not equal. So men couldn't have wrestling, and men couldn't have Olympic gymnastics. And that's where they went with it. And I think that's where they're going to go with this thing, too. They're going to turn around and say, we have too many companies, because obviously if not enough women want to be on the boards of companies, then maybe there shouldn't be so many companies. There's not enough women to go around.
It's going to leave California.
It's just going to be the same thing. We got to get rid of some of these businesses. Our economy is too good.
Or they're just going to all leave California.
Yeah.
Except for Silicon Valley, because those guys are cucked as fuck. And they'll probably...
They'll basically end up shutting down everything that women don't like. Not just the things that women actively protest against, but the things that even just the things that make them go meh, like baseball or being a CEO. They'll
things they're not interested in.
Yeah, they'll tear down the companies, therefore, that have the most men on their boards. Like sports companies are probably likely to have mostly men on their boards. But what about the Huffington Post board of directors? How's that? Oh, perfectly diverse, is it? They're 100% diversity. They achieved that. How did they do that? Oh, of course. You've got nothing but women around your table. Then you've achieved maximum diversity, especially if they're black.
Yeah, and the other thing that's going to start happening is when women who don't want to do these things get pushed into doing them and find them too hard because they're not passionate about the job is going to be considered toxic. When the feminist narrative started going out in the 80s that girls could play football, American football, with the pads and the getting run over by a guy who weighs as much as a truck, that football, we started seeing girls with broken collarbones and broken shin bones and stuff like that, because women's bones are not as dense as men's bones. And no matter how you want to define equality, biology doesn't listen. And yeah, there are some girls who are big and strong, and there are some girls who are good kickers, and there are some girls who are fast runners. There are plenty of girls who are fast runners. But as soon as that started happening, as soon as it was discovered that, hey, girls who play football get injured, football became a toxic environment. And the next thing you know, you start hearing this idea that football causes domestic violence, and football causes too many head injuries, and football causes too many broken bones, and how horrible it is, and everybody should be playing soccer anyway. No, because nobody gets injured playing soccer, right?
No, they pretend.
No,
They're
heading the ball doesn't do
pretending.
anything to your
They're
neck.
pretending, Hannah. I don't know how to tell you this, but most of the time they are pretending to be hurt for the sake of getting the ref to think they're hurt.
Well, there's documentation in the United States that heading the ball actually does the same thing to your neck that certain breakdancing moves did. There are microfractures or fractures that happen in the spine. That's what I was joking about. But yeah, I know a lot of it's the opposite of football. I watched a football player on the team that was the team before the team that went to state my senior year at my school. He got knocked out. Like nobody was home. He got hit so hard that you could hear it. Like you could hear him get knocked out. It was that bad. And he got up and he walked off to the side of the field. And he got right across the line, and as soon as he was across the line, he just collapsed. And this was a hit that should not have happened in the game, but in any case, that's football players, right? You get knocked unconscious and you get up and walk off the field. You get a broken bone, you can lay down. But you get knocked unconscious, you get up and you walk off the field. But yeah, soccer. There's a lot of us that grew up in my area that hold it in ultimate disdain. Sorry to everybody that likes soccer, but it's the truth. But no, girls playing football, that resulted in a change of mentality among feminists regarding the importance of football and the nature of football. As soon as girls couldn't handle it, it was a bad thing. And when they shove girls into areas of interest that only some of them are genuinely interested in, and they shove girls and women that don't want to be involved in that into it, and they start not liking it, and they start failing at it because they're not passionate about it, that's going to be the result. Oh, this area of interest is bad.
All right, I got a couple super chats, and then we'll move on to the final story. So, French82 gives us $5 and says Kramer versus reality. Mr. Roboto gives us $5 and says, if being a female was now a disability under the law, giving women an automatic check, would feminists be for it or against? Does it involve money that women are getting for free, in particular the feminist women? Then they'd probably be for it.
If feminist organizations got the ability to collect it on women's behalf and skim off the top, they would all be for it. Yeah. If feminist organizations were not going to get a dime because of this, then it would be an attack on women.
Yeah. Hoki Bukisa gives us $9.99 and says this will tank California stocks. If this makes the company too dangerous, companies will leave to save their stock. Yeah, just as I was saying, they're going to leave California with the exception of Silicon Valley because they're cucked. And you'll probably see that happening because they're going to project it's going to affect their numbers, and they already probably have other spots in mind. This will affect what California as a place to have a base of operations for companies. So build a wall around California. That's what I say. Okay, so moving on to the last story. The big one, I guess you could say. MPs decide whether to make misogyny a hate crime. You may remember the story coming from Nottinghamshire in which they declared harassment of women a hate crime. You may also remember wolf whistling was one of the main behaviors that was targeted. Now it's upskirting, and the campaign has expanded across the UK. From The Guardian, quote, the Labour MP Stella Creasy, Labour MP? I didn't see that coming, has put forward an amendment to the upskirting bill, due to be debated in the Commons this Wednesday, that would add misogyny as an aggravating factor in England and Wales. This would enable courts to consider it when sentencing an offender and require police forces to record it. Apparently, research has shown that these policies received overwhelming public support in Nottinghamshire. Researchers from Nottingham and Nottingham Trent universities found harassment of women and girls in public spaces remained endemic, with 9 out of 10, that's 93.7%, of respondents saying they had either experienced or witnessed it. The most experienced form of harassment was indeed whistling, and the most common location of incidents of harassment was at nightclubs and bars.
How
And
the hell can you hear a whistle at a nightclub or a bar?
you have to be louder than everybody else?
They're going to the wrong ones.
And when women experience harassment, they are most likely to walk away or ignore it. Well, yeah.
And gee, somehow they managed to survive that. Like, they didn't die from walking away from somebody who whistled at them. Holy Toledo. I think we might be onto something.
Well, let's look at some of these charts. So the whistling, okay. Whistling was the most common form of street harassment, with 62.9% of respondents either witnessing or experiencing it. After that, it was sexually explicit language, and then threatening, aggressive, or intimidating behavior. That seems like a kind of a bit of a broad definition because, okay, threatening and intimidating, that might depend a little bit on the woman if she feels threatened or intimidated. Aggressive, I don't know what that means because if the guy is just being forward, does that mean it's aggressive? I would say that probably for the purposes of this study, yes. That means if you're taking the initiative, being proactive, and approaching a woman to say hello or talk to her, you're being aggressive. I mean, that would be considered aggression only if the woman did not find you attractive, though.
Because Clause 2B
well,
also includes passive aggression.
Yeah, under feminist depending on whose standards you're looking at, because under feminist standards, things are aggressive that are not aggressive under normal people's standards. You walk up to somebody and say hi, you're not actually aggressing.
Yeah.
But a feminist might treat that as an act of aggression, even though it's just a greeting.
Yeah, but when you're polling these college students and these people who live in Nottingham and Nottingham Trent, I think it's called, you're asking those individual women who are not necessarily card-carrying feminists, but just regular women of a certain age group. They are basically describing what they feel. They do, that's the thing about these polls. They're so slippery because you're saying, did you feel threatened? Not.
Well,
and it's like, how do you?
And we don't even know if they did that. We don't even know if they used the cost method, where have you ever experienced a man whistling at you when you were walking down the street? Yes. Well, if they don't ask a woman how she felt about it, and just deem whistling street harassment, then it's suddenly an act of aggression.
What if you just
even though, like, if I'm walking down the street and a guy whistles at me, I'm gonna smile and shake my ass and keep on walking.
What if you were walking down the street and you just heard whistling, but you don't know it was for you? Like, you ever, like sometimes people, like, they happen to be walking past some people who are keeping to that they don't know, that are minding their own business, and they're having a conversation, and just as you're walking past, one of them busts out laughing. And then people think that they're laughing at you. Of course, that's kind of a narcissistic view, but some people do that, right? So if you happen to walk past some guys and somebody whistles, how do you know they're whistling at you? Like, for real, how do you know? So that's like, that might also affect the questioning, because if they said, have you ever heard whistling, and thought, well, no, they might have just said, have you ever heard whistling?
As you're walking down the street. Or they did,
or in a nightclub,
results based on people's in a nightclub, based on people's neurosis. But the other end of this is, like a lot of this stuff, the thing they hit on that was I guess an epiphany moment, or should have been an epiphany moment for most of them, is, these women walked past, walked on, kept going. Most women do when they deal with what feminists refer to as street harassment, and they survive it. It's not something that is genuinely damaging. They don't walk away with, a chunk taken out of their butt, or they don't walk away with less cash in their pocket. They haven't been robbed. They don't walk away unable to do their jobs, unless they work at certain tech companies, right? They don't walk away with their reputation besmirched. They don't walk away with having been held captive in a cell for a certain period of time. They just walk away.
Yeah.
And no damage has been done at all.
And also, isn't getting hit on in a bar or a club kind of like par for the course?
Why you go there?
They are basically breeding grounds. There's people who turn up for guest DJs, and there's people who turn up just because they want to dance, like in a group of people dancing. But for the most part, everyone knows they are breeding grounds, and they are set up and expected to be places where you go to meet, to hook up with someone.
You go there to socialize.
Yeah. One other thing I noticed based on this study, the catalyst for trying to pass this law, and I'm not done with the write-up, by the way. I've just paused here to look at these statistics. The catalyst for passing of this law is the problem with upskirting, which is what sort of like started this conversation, right? And upskirting is, for those of you guys who may not know, that's when people try to like sneak a peek underneath a woman's skirt, right? And the thing is, when I looked at this common form of street harassment, upskirting is way at the bottom at under 10% of forms of street harassment. So if it's such a small percentage, why did it essentially spur on this discussion around making misogyny a hate crime? It was like the tool that was being used to push something forward that apparently people were chomping at the bit, or champing at the bit, I don't know which one it is, to actually sort of put into policy. But it's actually a small percentage.
There's a hell of a market in getting photographs of famous women stepping out of limousines, wearing short skirts with no underwear,
and having wardrobe malfunctions.
Yeah, so I imagine they're sort of saying you plebs can't have this market. It's just for the professional. Journalists and photographers, that's what we call ourselves.
Paparazzi only.
Yeah, but if we see any of you plebs taking pictures that might include above a woman's thighs, then clearly you're rapists.
Clearly.
You know what's funny?
They're probably going to introduce licenses for upskirting, because they can't stop the paparazzi from doing it. They're part of the same team, aren't they?
Again,
what's funny is Jezebel, the Gawker publication for feminists, had article after article opposing things like upskirting and making a bigger deal out of it than it actually is. I mean, again, it's a form of harassment. That's actually a form of harassment. It's a shitty thing to do, to sneak a peek at something that somebody is not giving to you. And I would say, up kilting would be just as bad, or up shorting would be just as bad if women did it. But at the same time, I don't, if it happens, if something like that were to happen to me, and I were to compare it to other things that have happened to me, I would be very hard pressed to feel victimized by somebody getting a look at my panties. I might be a little annoyed, but it's an annoyance. It is not a major crime. But at the same time, they had all this outrage over this. At the same time as they had all this outrage over this, another area of Gawker Media had a writer that her entire career was dedicated to getting pictures of Lindsay Lohan's wardrobe malfunctions, beginning prior to when she reached adulthood, and publishing them. So these people are hypocrites. Like, you get them, they will have an absolute cow over the fact that this happens in on rare occasions, because 10% of a rare behavior, most of the population doesn't engage in public harassment of any kind. So it's 10% of a rare behavior. So the rarest of the rare happens to be this form of annoyance, and it is just an annoyance. And they freak out over it, and yet among their own are people who engage in it, and none of them ever say anything to those guys or gals, as it were.
And yeah, as I think I've put it out in some video or other, or if I haven't, I should have. If a man gets out of a limousine with his dick on display to thousands of cameras, he would probably be arrested for indecent assault, if not on the spot, then late that night. But if a woman gets out of a limousine with their punani on display, then the only people getting arrested are the people looking at it, especially if they have cameras.
Yeah.
And yet people still persist with this mythos that women are the oppressed ones, especially sexually.
Yeah. So take note, Louis C.K., if you're watching. Make sure you're wearing your pants when you got out of limos, because they're coming for you. They don't want you to work anymore.
Even if you say, "Please, may I show you my penis," and you say yes, you're still a fucking criminal. You still don't deserve to work ever again.
Yeah, exactly. One other thing I want to mention with these graphs before I move on is nightclubs were the most common location. So this is a location for harassment. Now, we already talked about how nightclubs and bars are where people usually go to meet. So if you are asking women where they get the most harassment, what they are telling you is that these are the places where I have to interact with men that I don't find attractive most often. That makes perfect sense. If you eliminate nightclub and bar from the list, then you're left with public transportation, which is about 25%, and then a bunch of other stuff that makes sense. Work, outside your home, in a park, on university campus, shopping, or at a car park. That's kind of weird, but that is under 10%. So again, this is, what do they call it? A tornado in a teacup? It's a storm in a teacup, right? It's not a big deal. But they're going to use this to try to change the laws around misogyny. Just think about that for a moment. Okay, so let me go on to the last bit, and then you guys can make your commentary on this final story. According to the campaigner Martha Jeffcott, I hope I'm saying that right, who has been leading training sessions for Nottinghamshire police on misogynistic harassment since 2016, the biggest impact has been on individual women's confidence as they have moved around the city. Quote, they know that they don't have to risk their own safety to challenge behavior anymore. Women don't want to come down hard on these men, but want to flag it so other women don't have to experience it. It's an amazing feeling of sisterhood, especially when repeat perpetrators are picked up, she said. Jeffcott says, quote, it's totally the time for women to feel safe on the street.
I wonder what race the repeat offenders usually are. I wonder if there's a massive racist thing accidentally going on here. Maybe.
Yeah. No. Supt Mark Khan, the lead on hate crime for North Yorkshire Police, said. He said,
Sorry,
it's about. It's okay. It's about catching behavior at an early stage. Today's flasher is tomorrow's rapist. Maybe today's flasher is tomorrow's rapist. Really?
God.
Maybe we should have women wear special clothes so that they don't have to deal with it. I know of some cultures that are far more enriched than those of the West that have dealt with this problem by protecting their women.
When they say flasher, they're not talking about the women getting out of limousines with their cunts blatantly on display. That's not flashing.
No.
You silly boys. The flashing is the people taking the photographs because of the flashes.
There
The
you
flashes
go.
of the soldiers. That's the flashes we're talking about.
Yeah, the
They're
other
all men-
ones
and
are
they're all
just
men, by the way.
yeah. The other ones are just
and
women that are
also
there to
those-
party.
And any man wearing a brown trench coat, basically, we'll throw them in jail as well, just because
Just in case.
they're probably.
You know,
yeah.
it's kind of funny. I know one person out of all of the people I've met. I've been to now 5 different countries. Well, 4 different countries. I've been to 4 different countries in my life. Well, actually, I've had a layover in a country that I didn't actually get to see. So technically, I've been to 5 different countries. But I've met women in all of the countries I've been to. I've been all over the United States. I'm 46 years old. I've gone to 2 different colleges. I've had female friends everywhere I've been. I know one girl who was ever confronted with a flasher. One. And it was actually kind of funny. It wasn't she shrieked. She worked in a video store. She shrieked. She went into the back room and shut the door and locked it and all that stuff. But when she told the story later, she describes this guy who throws his coat open and helicopters his dick at her. And I'm sitting there thinking, if this guy was actually dangerous, I'd have gotten myself killed, because that would have made me laugh my ass off. What a ridiculous and stupid thing to do. And it's a ridiculous sounding thing, and I can't imagine that when it happens that it ever doesn't look ridiculous and stupid.
He may have been a comedian.
No, he was actually disturbed. He had also done some things in the over 21 section that were, you just don't do them if there's not something mentally wrong with you. But it's still, I'm sorry that I know there are women out there going, how can you say this is not a big deal? It's not a big deal. It's a big deal when somebody puts their hands on you against your will and does physical harm to you. And it's annoying when somebody does something like that. It's annoying or ridiculous and possibly something to laugh about for the rest of your life. Oh my God, that guy looked like such an idiot. It'd be the same thing as there was a girl I knew that when she got mad at somebody, she would grab her boobs and shake them at the person as though there was some sort of connotation. I'm shaking my tits at you, therefore, I win. And they were pretty big. I can't imagine that felt great.
It's a bit like beating on your chest like gorillas.
Yeah, but and it looked ridiculous too. It just looked ridiculous and stupid. But in any case, I just like to not be able to differentiate between something that is ridiculous and stupid and annoying, and maybe a little shocking if you're sheltered, and something that is actually dangerous, harmful, damaging, and threatening. To not be able to differentiate between those two things, that actually is a mental handicap. Feminism is a mental handicap.
Well,
Also, thought crime. As we hinted earlier, this comes down to thought crime. If it's different because of women because of misogyny being a thought that you cannot prove, but you decided you can prove based on the accuser rather than the accused. There's like I said, they employed the Nottinghamshire model 2 years ago, and that was when the totalitarian victim crimes. Completely forgotten my words. Thought crimes, totalitarian thought crimes began, and it's just been getting rolled out across the country, rather than rolled back like it would in any sane, serious country. The absolute state of the UK. Literally thought crime.
the absolute state, exactly. What you guys need is thought patrols, not thought crimes. But yeah, so that happened. Let us know what you guys think. I think it's just this is just more control. It's just more control. And thinking may soon be a crime. It is. It is. All right, so we're going to go ahead and wrap up the show. Are there any final thoughts from anyone on the stories that we've talked about? Maybe something that we didn't say?
I'm afraid I don't have my thinking license.
Oh, yeah. Thinking license. Well, I do have some super chats. I have one. Mr. Roboto gave us $2 and says, "What if he said I am the one good man?" Well, then he has to compete with all the other one good men because there can only be one good man.
It's like the Highlander.
Like the
But
Highlander.
he is Femme Shady.
Yes.
He's the only Femme Shady. All you other Femme Shadies
So
are
you
fat,
better-
dumb, and lazy.
I believe he prefers feminine.
You better sharpen your blade. Sharpen your katana because you're gonna have to compete with all the other guys to be the one good man. Okay, so we're gonna be going into the after show where we're gonna be looking at this article called "Queer Identity in the Me Too Movement: A Conversation with Emma Solkowitz." She's never going away. Emma Solkowitz stood up against rape culture 3 years before the Harvey Weinstein story broke. She was doing it before it was cool. But most articles
She's a revenge pornographer. I believe she's a professional revenge pornographer. I think that's her claim to fame at this point.
Oh,
yeah, pretty much.
Most articles about her mattress performance, erase the artist's queer identity. Why? Because that's important. We need to know more. So if you want to know more, then you should join us on the after show. To do that, you have to become a patron. Do so by going to www.patreon.com/honeybadgerradio and join us in the after show either as a participant or just a viewer if you're kind of broke like me. Also, be sure to leave me some happy birthday messages in the comments section as well as your thoughts on the stories. Smash that like button because it really helps our analytics. And that is all I got to say to you guys. So I hope you have a wonderful Tuesday. Have a drink on me. And I'll talk to you guys next time.